Thank you everyone for joining this evening. I hope that I bring some value to you and your operation. And most importantly, I hope that I'm able to challenge your thinking and encourage you to try something different or maybe something you'd never considered before on your own farming operation. I have to hand it to Sarah and Carlson and Megan Filbert. Both have been out to our farm, even though we're on the wrong side of the river over here in Illinois. We appreciate the time that they've been out and visited, and also the other opportunities we've had to engage with Practical Farmers of Iowa. It's truly a unique group and really a model that should be duplicated in every state of the union through farmer leadership and really practical things that can be done on farm. So let's go ahead and get started here. I got my email and number on there. You feel free to reach out and we can connect, or I can point you in the right direction with any follow-up questions or ideas that you have. But this here is one of my favorite photos of fall grazing after frost. You can see the high diversity cover crop mixes there, and this is actually on rented ground, so that can be done. And this is our herd, our combined herd, both the mama cows and the yearlings. Everything is in this group. All of the finishers have just gone to freezer camp in this photo. So that's just mainly the 1-year-olds and the mama cow herd. So, okay, a little bit about myself. I am a 5th generation farmer in Cambridge, Illinois. This photo here of this big hill is where my great-great-grandfather on my mom's side decided to settle. And it's been in the family now this year for 150 years. And it's pretty exciting to see something stewarded for that long. And anyway, we've been actively doing things in the no-till arena and in the advanced crop nutrition practices arena for quite some time. We really started with that in 1998, and we continue to explore from there. So I'm trying to, might have to help me out here just a little bit. Oh, there's my webinar chat. Very good. But anyway, we also now are multi-species cover crop on every acre. We are integrating livestock to improve soil health is the main driver behind that, but also provides opportunities for additional revenue streams. And it's really allowed us to be an advocate and a leader in the regenerative agriculture movement. So just to go over the regenerative term, may be new for some people, but regenerative agriculture is different from sustainable agriculture. Sustainable by its word implies keeping the status quo. So inputs in, outputs, everything's in balance. Now, sometimes the word sustainable is used in an unbalanced system. Any word can always get hijacked. But what's different about regenerative is it is really focused on improving year-over-year improvement of the soil, rebuilding, regenerating, bringing it back to where it was prior to, if we could get it back to as close as possible prior to the plow. And really, the 5 soil health principles come into play here that Jay Fuhrer and the Monacan Farm, along with the hotbed of soil health activity up in central North Dakota, termed really these 5 key principles. And these principles work in any climate. Now, you have to adapt it to your local area and context, but the principles remain the same. The application is what varies from place to place. But one is never till or minimal disturbance. So as close to no-till that you can get, the better. And no-till is what we've practiced for 25 years. You can see I'm standing in a field here on the right that was no-till high diversity cover crop. Then it was planted to soybeans after grazing. So that was our very first year of trying multiple species cover crops and grazing at the same time. You can see right here where my cursor's at, that's the rows of soybeans through that field. The second concept on the 5 principles of soil health is keep the soil covered. protecting it from wind and rain erosion, protecting it from solar degradation and extreme temperatures, really helping to moderate that soil surface and keep it in place. Third thing, keep something growing all the time. Today in Illinois, we've had a beautiful day, and cover crops are breaking dormancy and growing. And that way we're putting carbon and solar energy into the soil instead of just not getting any benefit out of it. So that's a good thing. The other thing is maximize diversity. And this is tough in the Midwest because we grow corn and beans and more beans, it seems like. I'm excited. We are participating in that PFI conference tomorrow in Springfield, and looking forward to that. So hopefully we'll be able to see some great things come out of more crops than just corn or soybeans. And finally, integrating livestock. And number 5 is really, for us, the toughest thing there is to do, because I spent my childhood trying to take out fences. We took down all sorts of old building sites, filled in wells, took out pipes, because, hey, we're row crop farmers, right? So we were going ahead and did everything possible to eliminate those things. And now today, we're looking for ways to bring those back on the row crop land that has no infrastructure at all, no water, no fences, and no perennial crops to graze. So that's the great thing. And really, we were looking at these things on our farm. The first 4, we were doing those, and we were getting good results. But I'll take you on a little journey. When we went to number 5, we really realized there's a lot more opportunities out there. So that's kind of the background of where we've been. A little bit of the family history. This is my dad's side, farmed in Beardstown, Illinois area. They had a dairy, 40 head. They had pork, chicken. They grew corn, alfalfa, oats, wheat, rye, watermelon, cantaloupe, sweet corn. A little more than just corn and beans, huh? Had a sawmill. And my great-grandpa sold veggies out of his pickup. He'd load up the vegetables, take it to town, sell them out of back of his pickup, and come home. And you look at all the different revenue streams that they had there, daily revenue stream out of the dairy, seasonal out of the pork and chicken, annual out of these, but sawmill, diversity. So just like the soil health principles, they had diversity of crops. They really had something growing all the time. They were doing a lot of those things, and honestly, we'd kind of forgotten how to do that. So, that's one of the things that was kind of interesting. Then on the other side, my mom's side of the family, this was the homestead there. We grew beef, dairy, pork, chicken, eggs. They did 1,000 eggs a day going to a hatchery. Corn, oats, alfalfa, wheat, cover crops then. We grew cover crops as a nitrogen source pre-World War II. But you look now today, this hillside, that was the hill right there going on. Don't like this erosion right here, but that's the hillside, and see there's a field here, different crop there, different crop here, different crop here, another crop back there, another crop up here. There was a diversity of rotation. And that's what we did, because we didn't have the chemicals to be able to allow us to go monoculture. But then again, there were some benefits to these polyculture type systems. So anyway, now today, really we've been pretty monoculture, corn and soybean only from 1984 to 2015. And just like everybody else, we thought we'd really had that dialed in and perfected that. And we kept tweaking with, planter attachments and latest formulations and go for yield, right? So we integrated cover crops in 2016 because of yield and the soil health benefits and those kind of things. And then we discovered how livestock could possibly help us out. So we began experimenting with the neighbor's cows, which is always better to experiment with than your own cows. And so we began with 16 pair from the neighbor, and we just grazed them for him. Seemed to work pretty well. So we bought 14 or 16 of our own head, Hereford steers, and grazed them all summer long. And we planted wheat, so that after the wheat we could plant high energy cover crops to graze the animals on. So that gave us additional variance in the crops that we were growing, some risk management there, some diversity. But that was the beginning of kind of the stacked enterprise between wheat and beef and looking at that. And then after that, the next year, we began direct marketing the beef that we were raising, because we were raising a high quality, high value product that people want, and they want to trust the source which it came from. So we decided to start direct marketing the beef as Grateful Graze, the company name, where we ship directly to consumers, mainly within a 200-mile radius of our farm, which is one-day shipping. Coming back on here, Maggie, if you can help, I seem to have troubles with the chat box not appearing. Can you turn back on?
It should be on
Oh,
your.
there it is.
Yeah.
For some reason, I just tapped the top of my screen, it pops up. Okay. If you do see somebody ask a question, if you would just shout it out in case I miss it.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that.
So that's a little bit of the background on our farm, where we're from, and kind of where we got to that point of deciding to do things a little bit different. And tonight, you signed up for climate change. And we are going to talk about climate change, but we're also going to talk about changing climates. And those are two different things. And I think it's really important for all of us to understand where we're at and what is going on today. So first question for you to think about, and you don't have to answer in the chat box, but if you want to, you're welcome to. But I want you to be thinking about, how are you adapting to a changing climate? You're aware that things are different. Now, the cause of the difference is obviously up for great debate, but we are getting more 100-year floods every 10 years than every 100 years. We are getting increasing intensity and decreasing frequency of rainfall events pretty much nationwide. And those kind of things really put some stress on our crop production system. So we have to be ready to address those things. And those changes in weather extremes are happening and documented. And the question is, how is rainfall intensity and frequency affecting you? Think about that in the last 20 years, just how, that perfect inch a week that we seemed like we kind of got back a while back, we don't get so much anymore, but we certainly do seem to get a lot of rain at once. And that is not just, that is fairly well documented. Other changing climates, and this think outside the box a little bit, is also our business climate. How are costs, margins, and market access affecting you? If you're a beef cattle producer, the consolidation there and the lack of regulations, country of origin labeling, all kinds of things are really big on the beef market right now. Dairy, really big change in market and federal marketing orders and processor capacity, when plus two large dairy cooperatives and or businesses have gone bankrupt in the last couple months. Costs, do they ever go down? It seems like the costs like to run up. When we had $7 and $8 corn, they haven't run down to where it was when we had $3 corn last time. So it really puts a squeeze on our margins, how much margin we make per acre, how many dollars per acre we're able to generate. Regulatory climate. Do you think in the future you're going to be affected by more or less regulations? I think that's a pretty easy answer. There's more and more regulations coming down the pike, so that imputes a cost and it imputes a need to change that will always be ongoing, that we need to be aware of. The consumer climate. How consumer choices and a lack of trust affect you in the future? We're going to talk a little bit about the massive shift that's going on right now in consumer diets and consumer thoughts and consumer trust, that ultimately the person who buys the food at the grocery store is in charge. and we need to be thinking more about them and less about just growing something and hoping somebody will buy it. So the climate and the climates are changing. I hope to help you think differently, and most importantly, I hope to help you prosper here this evening. This is one of my favorite quotes. You know, the electric light bulb did not come from the continuous improvement of candles. So to continuously eke out another bushel or two of corn and soybeans is probably not our answer long term. We're really good at producing commodity crops. We really stink at doing anything else. So we need to think long and hard about what is your unfair advantage. In other words, what do you have that nobody else has that you can put to work and help you create a revenue opportunity that no one else is taking advantage of? So be thinking about that, because this is going to require real change, not just incremental changes. So some of the things that we're trying to do right now to not make just incremental changes are listed on this sheet. And some of our team members who are here this evening would be would laugh because they're like, you should add some more stuff up there. But anyway, we'll get to that. I want to take a look here at the chat box. I apologize. Carl asked, the key is sustainability and resilience. Any thought? Yes, sir. There is a thought to that, and we're going to get to that in just toward the end here. So here's some of the practices that we're doing right now to change that, to make that light bulb, okay, to go from candles to light bulbs. This is our planner up here. Gives us a lot of capabilities to do the old paradigm correctly, but it also gives us the opportunities to integrate with new paradigm type agriculture. So we got steering systems on here, and if you look, here we are running in the field. We plant the cover crops with actually skips in there in order to put the seed row right between these cover crops. And we've adapted that now to planting soybeans inside of wheat, and harvest the wheat for grain, come back and harvest the soybeans for grain. And then over here, we're working with the 60-inch rows, and how can we get a cover crop to grow better within 60-inch rows during the summer, so we've got something to feed within crop or something after the crop. Up here you can see this is where we've gone into heavy residue and been able to directly seed in row crops and do some things. This is our, we decided to advance really fast here, but we also have opportunities where we've taken 160-acre field and planted 2 different crops at once. So in these areas, we were planting soybeans, and in these areas, we were planting cover crops for grazing, because cows don't really care if the field's straight. They'll graze anywhere. So, you know, that's where we're looking at taking our marginal ground, putting the cover crops, taking our high-performing ground and putting it to the standard row crops. So again, just different thinking. And finally, we build a lot of our own equipment on the farm to make things happen. This is what we affectionately call our inter-weeder seeder, because my dad accuses me of, we have spent all of our life trying to kill weeds, and now you're out here trying to plant weeds. My response to that is if you don't plant the weeds that you want, AKA cover crops, nature will send you the weeds that you don't want. So something to keep in mind. So here's a little more look at the skip strip covers after we roll. So here we have 3 rows of cover crops. They're planted 7.5 inches apart, which leaves us a 15-inch corridor for planting corn or beans within. So right here, operations, we plant green. In the past, we'd sprayed Power Max, and then we roll. In the future, we have gone for 2020, we will be non-GMO, non-neonicotinoid, and non-glyphosate. And I've had some people tell me nonprofit, but that's what we know, is that if we learn that there's the wrong thing to do, we will quit doing it. And the overwhelming evidence, which I've been following on glyphosate for a long period of time, for about 20 years, is unfortunately I've had enough, and we're pulling the plug on it. So, but this gives you an idea what that field looks like, and it's just excellent for weed control by having that mat on the ground. All the wonderful soil health principles are in action right here. Here are some views from different parts of the field and looking different directions. And on here, I've got a YouTube video that I'm going to switch over to, and really great. So it's a 60-foot roller that we can go ahead and run through the field and get over the rye really quick in order to, we plant, we spray, and then we roll. So that's just a really great opportunity and how that's worked, and it's a neat tool to be able to utilize on the farm. And plus Ryan drives it and he gets to drive it really fast, so I think he appreciates that. So anytime you got something in the field that you can drive fast, everybody's happy. So
Should we be seeing the video right now?
very good. I'm going to switch back to,
Monte.
oh shoot, we must have had a technical problem with
Yeah,
with
I
that.
missed that.
Okay, there will be links. We'll have some links posted that we can share later on with the YouTube. Must not have worked this time. We'll get back to where we were. I'll get into experience with rye here in a little bit, Jackie. So again, here's the wheat bean intercrop. We're, rather than growing it, we're just thinking differently. Well, this cover crop's an expense. How can we turn that cover crop into a revenue? So we can either graze it or we can harvest it for seed. So we tried this last year. We've expanded to trial a couple different crops this year, both rye seed and wheat seed, and plan to harvest both and then turn around and harvest the soybeans underneath for cash. Now it is a work in progress. We haven't got it all figured out yet. Jason Malk and I have worked on several iterations how to make this happen. But overall, the beautiful part is that field right there had no herbicides last year, and it's pretty amazing. But as far as how rye works in our part of Illinois, rye unfortunately is one of the few things it seems like you can get to grow and grow well at. And unfortunately, it just, the other crops we try to include for diversity is a challenge. So the other question is turn a cover crop into revenue? Yes, I mean, rather than just having a cover crop there for the soil health benefits, if we can graze it, turn it into beef, if we can graze it, turn it into lamb, or if we can harvest the seed and let the cash crop grow through and overlap, that's really great. And we're going to talk about stacking here in the future. So Maggie, we're going to try another video here and you can help me out if it's working or not. But one of these things as we prepare for climate change is looking at these 5 soil health principles in action. And this worked earlier on our, when we were trying it out. So we will see if we can make this work this time. Okay, can you see the video?
Yep, I can.
Okay, we're going to hit play and hopefully it works. So here this is our farm where we've got cover crops and long-term no-till residues in place. It's spring of 19. We've had more rain than we ever deserve. And right across the road, same soil type, same slope, same everything. We can see some significant surface sealing, surface runoff, dirty water, carrying away precious topsoil and nutrients, where right across the street it is perfectly fine. So it's just an extreme example of how when you do it right, it's amazing how it can work. So that's almost worth playing again, but it's pretty fascinating how just, long-term leaving the soil alone, planting cover crops on it, can make just such a huge difference in the water cycle. And one of the things, I'll talk about it later, I'll talk about it now, is those nutrients in that water right there are not lost. They cost the farmer money in land and nutrients that he purchased, but they also cost everyone else downstream money to have to clean up from that. So whether it's a fisherman or a water source or any of those kind of things, there's unintended consequences, and it's not just a loss, it is a cost. So move back here to previous slide. So I just think that's a key point right there. Lost nutrients, are you paying money and costing someone else money? So I think that's a key thing to remember, is that it's not just lost, it is a cost for you and a cost for somebody else. So some opportunities in the greenhouse gas arena. The three main greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxides. So there's opportunities for farmers to limit and or sequester greenhouse gases, which can lead to climate change. That's the question, but we do know the atmospheric carbon dioxide is much higher than it's ever been. So we're doing something wrong, either from emissions or from farming or from how we treat our forests. It's significantly different in the last 100 years. So one of the ways we look at it is with no-till corn, we gain roughly about 0.1% organic matter increase per year that we do no-till corn. No-till beans, no gain, okay? But the no-till corn, we can gain about 0.1%. If we roll down those cover crops like what we were showing you, high biomass cover crops, we can gain about 0.1% organic matter per year. But what we found that's most interesting is when we integrate livestock onto those covers, even though we're not rolling down anywhere close to the same size cover crop, we can gain 0.2% organic matter increase per year, which is just phenomenal. So over here, some opportunities that we have for nitrous oxide is, and remember, it's 298 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And that makes a big difference. And ways as farmers we can do that is if we limit nitrogen applications to planting on. So nothing ahead of planting, and making sure we're timing those nitrogen applications to the exact time and when the plant needs it. And then also another big thing is limit the amount of N applied at any one time. Anytime you exceed more than really 80 units in any one application, you run the risk of not only burning stable carbon out of your soil, you run the risk of volatilizing carbon to the atmosphere and nitrous oxide atmosphere. Using stabilizers, inhibitors, and put it in the soil, don't put it on the surface. I mean, all this is just common sense stuff. One other thing is pay attention to the residue and the cover crop carbon nitrogen ratio. So if you can always push that carbon nitrogen ratio a little heavier for the carbon, you create a sink for the nitrogen to stay in the soil as organic matter versus going to the atmosphere. And finally, avoid creating waterlogged soils, because waterlogged soils is where we get nitrate reduction. So nitrate's NO3 and nitrous is NO2, and NO2 likes to go to the atmosphere and cause problem. So pulling up chat box here just a little bit, make sure I'm keeping up with everybody. Jackie asks, aren't the cattle putting methane into the atmosphere? And should we be bringing livestock back to the farm? So Jackie, I'm going to get into that toward the end. The cattle, you have to look at the whole life cycle analysis when it comes to cattle. And it's very different in the production practices and the management practices of what happens with cattle. And it's extraordinarily exciting because guess what? Methane is CH4. Notice the C in there? That's carbon. Well, that carbon, this 0.2%, where is that coming from if we're not creating more biomass on the surface? It's coming from exudates into the soil as sugars because of stimulated root growth, but it's also coming from cycling of the carbon and the methane cycling because of grazing. Remain tuned in. And livestock integration is way to Great Plains for sale. Yeah, that's true. And we're going to talk about that too. You guys are all asking questions ahead of time, so I'm going to put that on pause and keep going. So as we went ahead and, I'm really looking at all these things, trying to figure out what is our next step. what do we do as a farm? And I hope you're thinking that too for your farm. But this was my aha moment. When I put the picture on the screen, you're going to wonder, what in the world? But this was really my aha moment. So I had the opportunity to go listen to Gabe Brown, a farmer that's a regenerative agriculture leader, at the National No-Till Conference. And then 2 weeks later, I got to hear him again at the No-Till on the Plains Conference. And sometimes, you know, you need to hear things a couple times. But he talked about all the soil health stuff. I'm like, yeah, cover crops, I get it. That's great. Wonderful. Oh, you got livestock. Great. We can't do that. We've got $10,000, $12,000 an acre ground. You know, that won't work. But then when he started to talking about the nutrient value to human health and all those kind of things, I thought, well, that's interesting. Soil health, plant health, I've seen that. Plant health, animal health, I've seen that, and working with farmers in California on dairies. Animal and plant health to human health seems pretty logical. And then when he showed this picture of two eggs, one on the right is from his farm, one is an organic egg on the left. And there's obviously a difference in the vitamin A content and other things going on in that yolk. Okay, I got to check this out, because sometimes when things are too good to be true, they are just that. So I did what any good husband would do. For my wife's birthday, we went to Bismarck, North Dakota to visit Gabe Brown on his ranch to just see if it is true, because he's done some amazing things, get soil up to 11 and 13% organic matter. So it was a great time. We learned a lot, got to see his cattle herd and how he managed them, moving them across the landscape, mimicking buffalo, which was one of the questions. Definitely moving the herd, constantly moving, giving adequate rest, and really changes how carbon cycles within that system. Here's Robin and Gabe were out looking where pigs had grazed, and just a massive amount of cover crops he's growing. And really look at that soil. He gets 90 days of growing season up there, for crying out loud. We get twice as much of that here. And the aggregate stability of that soil is just amazing. So I can vouch for it. I went to the mecca of soil health, and it is true, and it is amazing what is going on. And then gave me a little tour of his grass-fed beef business and what they're doing. And I looked at these. These are New York strips, okay? So New York strips are not known for marbling. Look at them. So you can grow great quality food, grass-fed, without grain. When all that was going around in my mind, I'm like, wow, we could take cover crops, turn them into meat, make it better for people, better for the environment, better for the animal. It's like, wow, I had a lot of things going on in my head. And then we're driving back home on the way home, and I took this selfie, because that's about exactly how I felt at that moment in time, of just, what in the world do we do now? But one thing I knew is I had to do what I call Project MOO. So Project MOO is what we've termed our livestock integration, and it's been a fantastic journey. So really, this is all about Principle 5, bringing it in all together to see how we can bring livestock back to the land. Started as these Hereford steers right here, went to the cow herd, which I actually bought the British white cow herd from Gabe Brown. We added hair sheep. They're a different ecosystem player. We've added pastured poultry, and all of these things are working together, where we'll graze the cattle, followed by sheep, followed by, actually these are meat chickens, but we'll follow by the layer chickens for fly control, and move them across the landscape. Not only do we have diversity of cover crops, we have diversity of animals grazing too. So it's pretty exciting. And here's where we were. So now you can see those skip strips out there. That is our standard protocol. And we're just bringing these cattle across. So this is April 7th of this year, before we started the Great Noah's Flood Part 2. And we're moving the animals across here, grazing these cover crops. This is rye, triticale, hairy vetch, Austrian pea in this mix here. And we've got two groups. This is a finisher group. This is the mama cow group in the background. And just constantly moving. So what we're trying to do is work with nature instead of against nature. Instinctively, a herd everybody in that herd wants to grab the best bite before my neighbor does. So if you have a small herd, like our sheep flock here is really small, we keep them tight together so that they are competing for those bites. If they spread out over the entire landscape, they get lazy and they just eat ice cream. We want them eating a good balanced diet. The other thing is they always eat and walk forward, eat and walk forward. It's amazing just to sit there and watch them. They will walk from one side of the paddock to the other side of the paddock, just kind of back and forth. It's kind of like a cow version of Pong, if you will, just going back and forth. And the other thing is they always stay grouped together for protection. You know, they're instinctually known as delicious to coyotes and predators. So they try to always stay herd together, and the cows always stay together. You know, it's amazing how those instincts are there. So if you know those, we work with them. But some of the things we're doing is by moving them every day, we're also preventing parasites. We use no antibiotics, no wormers, no fly dope, no pesticides, no hormones, no immunizations, nothing. All we use is high diversity cover crops in order to get all the health benefits that we want. And you know, the other good part about moving every day is you keep clean and you avoid eating your buddy's toilet. So you just don't ever want to eat in your buddy's bathroom. So very, very important. And I'm show you a little bit here. I got the video up and we will pray that this works this time. But this is a picture of us moving the cattle. We're at about June 1st right now. We're still waiting to plant corn because it's been so wet. But we've moved them every day. They've been around this ranch 3 times. And the interesting part is that even though they'd been across this 3 times, we had this 30 inches of rain between April 7th and June 3rd when they were there. They still had minimal impact on corn yield. In fact, this field versus the field across the road right there to the west that you're looking straight across out yielded it by 13 bushels. So not only can we generate beef off the cover crop, we can also enhance soil health, and this year we improved the corn yield. So that's pretty amazing to be able to do this and no-till and still get all of those benefits out of it. It's just pretty exciting. So see, Mama's saying get going, and they're on their way to the next paddock. So we moved them every day, give them 8 to 12 acres every day, just so they could stay fresh and not impact the soil in a negative way for when we go back to row crops. Because this here has been grazed compared to where they're going to. All right, close that out. So, get to the next slide here in just a second. All right. Here's how we do it. Integrating livestock on the land. I call it the 7 Ps. Portable fencing, portable shade, mineral and essential oils are all in one unit here that we've built together to where we hook and move and make it quick, because the chore time per day will really kill your profitability. Portable water. So we've created a water systems here. This is a solar powered pressurized system with a portable reel that we can pump water a half mile away from a roadside tank. Planting cover crops and plant selection are key to making this work. Pasture map and planning, and I'll show you what those 2 things are here in just a little bit. But it's been a lot of farmer ingenuity to come up with these kind of things in order to run a portable charge pump here, and watering systems and everything mobile. So the planning part involves looking at when are our cover crop opportunities. Now, this is an old slide. We've adapted this a little bit now, but this was when I was first sitting down to do it. I thought, okay, I looked at my farm. When could I graze stuff? Okay, so if I have wheat in the ground, I know I can graze it before first hollow stem, which is this time of year. If I've got corn stalks with planted cover crop, either on 60-inch rows or interseeded, as soon as I harvest, I can start grazing that, okay? As long as there is 6 inches of grass and there's no corn on the ground, ear corn on the ground, it's, that they're gonna pref to that. I can graze that. Cover crops after wheat. These I can graze about the middle of August, and they get really big in September, October. Plus, they function as great winter stockpile all the way through winter. Swath grazing, that's an opportunity for some people. Doesn't really apply in our climate because we get too much rain. It's more for arid climate and where it freezes and stays frozen. But bale grazing, where we can bring out cover crops that we harvest here and feed it back to them in the winter. And then one of the keys to really make everything work was this time frame right here between June 1st, because we can delay soybean planting a little bit. But June 1st to August 15th, that is the critical time. Everything else works. This doesn't work. So perennial pasture is needed, or you have to be willing to set out some row crop ground maybe once every 8 years or something and plant a high diversity spring mix that can be grazed in June, July, August, so that after that's done, you can replant it to stockpile. So you get, 2 sets of grazing, a winter based cover crop and a summer based cover crop that you can come back to stockpile grazing in the winter. So you have to plan that ahead because you have that cost associated with that. You want to maximize the pounds per acre of beef that you're able to generate. The other thing is pasture map, and this has been a handy application for us. Allows us to go through and mark where the herd has been every day. We can record that. We can lay out paddock sizes, how many acres we want them to be, and we can know exactly how many days of rest it's been since the cattle have been in one location. Handy part about this, you can download it for free. There's a subscription service to use it, but it records everything, cattle weights and all those kind of things, where you know what your stocking density is, and just makes managing the cattle out there a lot better. So yes, it is good. I'm reading now on some of the chats here from Carl. Is it good to keep your cattle moving to minimize the soil compaction? Yes, and it's also good to keep your water, mineral, and shade moving, so that they aren't trafficking the same area or get in the habit and start making trails in the field. So again, the more diversity that you can have, the better, because that'll help us a lot in making sure we don't have a negative impact on the crop yield, or more importantly, on the soil. So good management solves a lot of things. And it's just paying attention to what's going on. It's pretty straightforward. So the next thing I want to visit about a little bit is just preparing for a changing business climate. And I want you to start thinking a little bit differently, and some questions were asked about this earlier. But I want you to start thinking about multiple revenue streams per acre per year, instead of just grow corn, harvest corn, grow beans, harvest beans. What are ways that we can get multiple revenue streams? Think about it, meat corn. Graze a cover crop ahead, grow corn afterwards. Think about wheat meat. Grow wheat, plant a cover crop, and after that cover crop, go ahead and graze animals on it. Excuse me. Another way is wheat and soybeans. Those stacked enterprises like I was talking about earlier. And then corn and soy alternatives. Right now, we're looking at growing peas, lentils, barley, wheat, and those kind of things to use for chicken feed. So that's another resource, because we've had customers asking us if we can have soy-free eggs, or if we can have corn-free eggs. So we can grow that, turn it into an egg, and sell it. I want you to also ask yourself, how can you harvest more energy per acre per year? So anytime we have the opportunity to grow a plant, or think about this, if 6 months out of the year the soil's not active because it's below 32, or 4 months out of the year if it's not active. The cool part about a cow is it's biologically active 365 days a year at 102 degrees. So there's always biology going on in the cow 365 days a year. So thinking differently about that. And think about, how can you harvest higher value energy per acre per year? Okay, instead of just corn, what about non-GMO corn, non-GMO soybeans, organic soybeans? What if we, grass-fed beef, organic grass-fed beef? What are all the different ways that we can get higher value, specialty crops, produce crops? Really challenge yourself to look differently. I don't ever want to be called a corn farmer. Okay, I'm a farmer who happens to grow corn. There's a big, big difference. And then finally, you need to ask yourself, how can you keep more of the value you harvest per acre per year? So we're growing feed grain corn next year to go directly to a mill, okay? And allow us to get a substantial premium over just non-GMO. The grass-fed beef business, rather than sell it to Thousand Hills or another consolidator, we're processing and selling it direct to the consumer. So rather than getting, 250 live weight, we're getting 750 live weight. And yes, it's a lot more effort to do that, but isn't that worth it? So we need to look at all these opportunities we have to stop the leaking of value leaving our farms, either from us not doing a good job of growing the right crop and mixture of crops, not thinking in ways to stack enterprises or multiple revenue streams, and divorcing ourselves from the marketing and just saying, okay, here you go, please sell my crop for me. So we have to challenge ourselves in those ways. And that's why we created Grateful Graze. And this has been an amazing experience. I've never done a business to consumer business before. It's always been business to business. We just have a lot of fun. We get to prepare some amazing meals. I can still taste these lamb chops right here. Here's a tomahawk steak. We do at-home delivery. We have tours out to our farm. We teach these people who've never been on a farm before, maybe, how things work. Never badmouth conventional agriculture. Always show there's an opportunity for improvement. Concert with the cows. This was a great opportunity just for people to come out and have fun. FFA soil judging contest was out at our pastures. This was a cover crop pasture, and they got to learn not only about the soils, but they got to see our cow herds and the sheep and all those things going on. We partner. This is this lady here is a chiropractor, and this is a neurosurgeon, or I'm sorry, brain doctor. Apologize, I'm having a brain fart right now. But Brian Ansu is a neurologist. Thank you, and he's doing work on the connection between the soil and food and human health. So there's just lots of amazing connections and people we've been able to meet, and opportunities to capture more of that value and keep it on our farm. So, and this comes right to the methane debate, and it's really not when it comes to methane in cattle. It's not the cow's fault. It's the how's fault, okay? So it's not the cow, it's the how. It's all about us as people, how we're managing. We either manage right or manage wrong in anything we do, whether it's cattle, crops, or anything in life. So when we started this, this Harris Ranch in the bottom left, and that's out there in Greeley, Colorado on the right. People don't like to see this. They want food that tastes great, and they want it to be good for their family. They want it to be good for the animals, and they want it to be good for the environment. And I understand animal production and these kind of things, but even now, I look at these and I just can't get my head around how is that good for the animal and how is that good for the environment. If you can just take a step back and look at that and just ask yourself, what are we doing? Are we doing the right thing? Is there a better way? And maybe it's not all about costs. Maybe it's about all of the value that we create as a producer. So I think so, Carl, you ask lots of great questions here. Yeah, so we need to be more value-based and profit-based, work for long terms and not put too much on short-term games. Any thoughts? I think we always have to do the right thing. I think oftentimes doing the right thing is also the most profitable thing. There could be a longer term approach than shorter term approach, but not always, because if you do the right thing, you generally are cost reducing, revenue increasing. Um, it's it's a system. It's a holistic thought approach, and I think that's a key in how you approach these things. So prepare for the changing regulatory climate. What's your plan for environmental regulations? Water, you know, surface water runoff, air pollution, huge problem out west, especially in California, with dust and particulate emissions, groundwater pollution, nitrates, and those kind of things, nitrogen regulation from how much you can apply due to nitrous oxide and greenhouse gas emissions, carbon, how much net carbon input for the energy required to farm the way that we do. We have a very prehistoric energy dependent farming system right now. And in order for us to really be forward thinking and move from this sustainable, as I have over here, sustainable is really neutral. It's 100% less bad. I get a kick out of that. Conventional practice, I like this. One step better than breaking the law. How awesome is that? So we really got to move out of this mindset into how can we regenerate things and make it better than what it was before. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity here, speaking to the profit of ecosystem services and revenue streams, because people want to pay for clean water. People want to have clean air. People want safe groundwater. People don't want nitrogen in the atmosphere. If we do those things right, then those are services that farms can benefit from. It all to get the markets established, but there's opportunities there. Regulations, look at labor regulations, what's coming down the pipe. Minimum wage, dramatic increases pretty much anywhere in the country. Work week, overtime in ag is going to be pretty much a standard in the future. Healthcare costs, safety costs, family leave, all these kind of things, which is better for people, but implies some extra costs within the system. But how can we change that into, how can we take advantage of that? I think it really pushes to evolve into doing things better. You've seen, for example, McDonald's has gone to the tablets that you order in there instead of paying somebody $15 an hour to take your order. Well, that's really the simple part of their business, okay? So what all we can do within grazing to automate it or to take the labor component out of it allows us to minimize that simplistic, repeatable, process-driven stuff. But then at the same time, now we can take those resources that we're doing the simple stuff and we can aim at the valuable stuff. What's our breeding program? What's our cover crop grazing? What's our crop rotation planning? What is our marketing? How do we do even better at maximizing soil health? How do we do even better with plant and animal health? Really taking those basics out and focusing on the things that get us greater gains that's what will happen as these type of regulations come into place. So I think it's interesting to think of these sources of income instead of sources of cost. So really what we do with Grateful Graze, is we're connecting farmers to families with food they can trust, raised in a way that is best for the people, the environment, and the animals. And it's really interesting. Everybody cares about the animals. Everybody cares about the environment, but people mostly care about themselves. Imagine that. 90% of our buying motivations is for healthy food. And I enjoy showing this because we've been able to create a great product. This is a ribeye steak, a tomahawk ribeye, that we can get good marbling on, 100% grass-fed. And good management can allow you to do this, because I've had a lot of bad tasting grass-fed beef, and I just don't want to raise bad tasting grass-fed beef. We don't have time for that. How can you charge a premium price for a subordinate or an inferior product? So I think it's always important that we always are doing the right thing to create the right product so that we can get that value and bring it back to the farm. Some things we do to make the magic happen is we have a website at Grateful Graze. You can order anything you want online. We ship it to your home. Farm tours. This is really interesting. People want to get connected to the farm. People on average buy $30 a month from us until they come on a farm tour. Then it goes to $85 a month because they see it, they trust then. That's what makes the difference. And we're working on building out ways to do virtual farm tours. That's nowhere close to where we want to be yet, but in our blog, we can talk about, what we're doing and how we raise things, and a picture of our home delivery and what we're doing there. And so this slide here I think is interesting because people just love leading the cattle to the next. Cows just chase the wagon. They have a good old time, something interesting out there for them to see. But they like to go ahead and look, we got pictures being taken, videos being taken, picture here. But look at the demographics here. So this gentleman here, he's older. He's got a point and shoot camera that he's taking. And this is a millennial. And we've got Gen Xers on here. And we've got boomers. All age groups. It's not just young people that want this. All age groups want this because they know it's a healthy choice. And it's interesting. We're about third in our demographics. 90% of every group is related to health. Whether they're concerned about their health, their doctors told them they need to do something about their health, or they got a real problem and they need to change it. That's kind of the three generations there that kick in. But we got to be aware of these kind of things. And by having this Grateful Graze company, it's given me some additional insights into what is going on. And I think that is important to keep in mind. And I want to get to how important is social media for marketing. That's another, I'll get to that maybe down the road. But I think social media is less and less important for marketing all the time just because there's so much noise out there. It's important for your customers. It's hard to get people on social media. Getting to people is better with search engine optimization and those kind of things. But maybe Maggie will have me back for a direct marketing webinar sometime. But I think there's some things we need to be ready for in a changing consumer climate. And one is Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger. My guess is they'll reach 20% share of market in 10 years. I originally had 5 years. When I made the slide, I changed it for 10 years just so you guys wouldn't think I was being too crazy. But these are meat substitutes or fake meats. They'll probably be 20% share of market in 10 years. Lab meat hasn't rolled out yet, but it's real close. I guess that'll be 20% share of market in 10 years too. A lot of money behind these things and a lot of people that feel bad about hurting animals to eat meat. And that's just the reality of it. Look at other trends going on. Soy, almond, rice, any sort of nut or coconut or anything that you can have, they make a beverage out of and call milk. And it continues to grow. Milk is, dairy milk is, real milk is really declining and declining quickly. Grass-fed beef and grass-fed categories are actually growing at 20% plus per year. We're right around 8.5 to 8.9% share of market in the grass-fed space, and it's growing at 20% per year, so it's definitely a trend. But here's one thing that's a little bit scary. 85% of it is imported. It's not scary. It's a huge opportunity for U.S. beef. Animal welfare, cow burps are huge concerns with the public. The consumer wants to know, how are you treating that animal? Does it have a good life? You've got it in a CAFO. It's standing in its own crap. It's confined. They do not like that. And I'm with them. It don't make sense. But in the days when the customer wanted it for the cheapest possible price, then you did everything possible to make it as cheap as possible regardless of some of those kind of things. But now today, the consumer wants something different. So if they want that different, I'm not going to argue with the consumer. They write my check. I'm going to make it for the consumer. So I think that's the mentality that we have to adopt as farmers. And as people are generationally removed from the farm, it's harder to trust the food they eat. Every generation distrusts more, and there's kind of a Netflix effect of food documentaries that help that too. Social media, all these things. There's a lot of noise out in that space, and that causes a trust level. We found in our research 52% of the people do not trust a food label, let alone anything else in the food system. So organic, anything, they don't trust the label. They want to know the farmer. It's pretty fascinating, and it's a huge opportunity for people who want to take advantage of that. So this one's going to really get me in trouble. I think if you look here, this is corn production in 2015, 2016. This is what happened to corn that was grown, okay? Since Iowa likes corn, we'll talk about this a little bit. Illinois, number 2 corn state, so we're inferior to Iowa, but we got you beat on soybeans. Ethanol, if they got 90 million acres of corn, 34 million acres of corn is for ethanol. You realize ethanol is only a few signatures away from not being needed? And a few more K Street lobby donations away from not being needed? It could be as quick as a stroke of a pen, or it could also suffer a slow, painful death because of electrification of vehicles. 20 years, gasoline engines might look a little dumb on the road, be dominated by electric vehicles. So I think there's a lot of acres of corn production today at risk. What are you going to do different? Milk, 4% is milk production. I think 50% in the next 10 years is at risk there, as fluid milk consumption really plummets. We'll still have milk as products, but they're starting to get replaced too by alternatives. What if that is a worst case scenario there? Beef up here consuming 10% of the corn. If we go to 20% fake meat, 20% lab meat, and 10% grass fed, well, there's 4.5 million acres gone. And high fructose corn syrup, it's going to get affected some because people are waking up to issues with that. But if you look at 45% of the corn crop, 50% of the dairy, 50% of conventional beef has some significant risks associated with it. What does that mean for conventional farming today? So not only do we have serious climate change issues, we got serious business and regulatory and consumer related change issues. And I think that's key to remember. So this was brought up earlier, and it's a friend of mine, Will Harris, down in Bluffton, Georgia, has been doing some amazing things for 20 years with grass-fed beef, lamb, goats, guineas, ducks, chickens, everything. And they were selling to Epic bars, and Epic made the claim about how great regenerative ag is, and General Mills bought Epic bars. Well, General Mills was uncomfortable with these claims, so they actually came in with a third-party company out of Minnesota and did a life cycle analysis of everything associated with their production practices. And they did it for these other areas too. And I think you'll find it awfully interesting. Conventional beef, so this is the total emissions of carbon dioxide per pound of beef. In conventional feedlot beef, when you look at the entire life cycle from growing the crop and growing the animal and how it's treated, spread manure, hauling, everything, it's about 33 pounds per pound of beef. But when you raise it regeneratively with the daily moves, doing everything like what we're doing on our farm, I just didn't have General Mills funding a life cycle assessment for me, so I'm gonna borrow Will's here. 3.5 pounds negative. We're putting carbon dioxide in the soil. When you look at all of the benefits associated with the roots putting carbon in the soil versus the methane coming out the mouth or a little bit out the rear end of the cow, That's the net effect of carbon out of the atmosphere. Pretty fascinating. The other thing that's interesting is look at here, soybean is actually positive, and burger is 3.5 pounds positive because of the lentils, chickpeas, all that stuff that goes into it. If you want to be carbo, go ahead and have a Grateful Graze or White Oak Pastures grass-fed beef burger. Every time you have an Impossible burger, they'll offset each other. See, there's hope in everything. But then you look at Beyond Burger, chicken and pork. You know, monogastrics have a much lower methane footprint. That's what causes that. But they also don't graze and return it to the ground like beef and grazing ruminants will. So I think that's pretty fascinating. You can look that up on the White Oak Pastures life cycle assessment and come up with it. There's some amazing work that they've done. So before we get to our final questions here, this is one of my favorite quotes, is what did me in was not what I did not know. It was the things I knew which were not so. So as farmers, we need to be thinking about what are those things that we just know, we know for sure. And then let's start questioning them, because they probably aren't for sure. I think we have to take a hard look at everything we're doing, because what has gotten us to where we are today probably won't keep us going into the future. You know, the one thing that's constant is change, and we need to be well aware of that. Final picture here. This is when I got my group in from Gabe Brown out in North Dakota. I had them in the corral just to make sure they were settled down, no problems and all that jazz. And I happened to take this picture, and we had a grain bin site in the background. And I got to thinking, that's really interesting. Those grain bins, that's the old paradigm of agriculture. Growing grain, selling it to an ethanol plant or shipping it to China. And in the foreground here is a new paradigm of agriculture. Cover crops, grazing ruminants, and all those kind of things. But there's only one thing separating the old paradigm of agriculture from the new paradigm of agriculture, and that's simply do. None of this happens by just sitting here and listening to me ramble on a webinar. You have to make a plan. You have to actively pursue it within your local cultural context, and you have to do the work. It is work. It is hard work, but it is very rewarding. And I encourage you to not just be a hearer of knowledge, but put it to work and be a doer of knowledge. So I hope you'll stay in touch. These are different organizations that I've been proud to be a leader of now. And we've got different ways of connecting with people across the country. And I hope that you'll stay in touch. And I encourage you to do everything possible to really change not only your climate impact, but really the impact of your farm for your own generation, but for generations to come. So, Maggie?
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Monte. And we definitely have time for questions. We've got about 15 minutes. So please, if you have any follow-up with anything that Monte has gone over in the past hour, or if you want to explore something he maybe hasn't touched much on, by all means, open up that chat box and submit your questions or give us your comments.
I do see we have a couple of our team members on board here to heckle me, I would hope. So please, I see JR, Robin, and Bob are on here. Feel free to ask some questions in there, something I might have screwed up, and go from there. So the first question here from Jackie Armstrong, citation, a life cycle analysis. If you just Google White Oak Pastures life cycle assessment, you get about 50,000 hits. Okay, so it's big news in the regenerative ag space. White Oak Pastures. Okay, how many head of cattle do we have? So that varies by the time of year. We have 60 in our breeding group, and we've got. We will finish. I think we're going to finish next year right around 30, 35. There's 27 in the yearling calves that we just weaned. So we're in the process of building the herd in order to meet. We found the best performances with calves that we are born and raised on our farm, just way outperform 8 weights that we might buy and bring in. However, labor needs changed over time. Holy smokes, no-till farming, corn and soybeans, one person per 700 to 1,000 acres. We still have that, but the crop team helps us make like egg mobiles we're making today, and installing water line is what the crop team was helping us with. And yet the livestock team is 2 full-time people and 1 part-time. In the summer, we'll go to 3 full-time people. Labor is our number 1 cost in doing things this way. Any thoughts about?
I have a follow-up on that, if you don't mind. Yeah. So I was just really curious about, what are the tools that you use to stay in communication and like keep the transparency between all your different team members? You've got a lot of layers going on within your business. So that app that you mentioned at one point, that seems like something, other employees could log onto and see what's going on. But do you have, what is your strategy to keep everybody aware of what's going on and what needs to be done?
Well, I try to keep it as chaotic as possible. I'm sure everybody's chuckling right now. But everybody has roles and responsibilities. We're blessed with the great managers at each one of our organizations. So, Ag Solutions Network, that's managed by Dawn, and Silas does California Ag Solutions. Ryan and my dad and JR do Bottens Family Farm. Grateful Graze, we have a person helping out there, but that's primarily Robin and I right now until we transition to another full-time person. Ag Emerge, that conference, and that's something everybody should look into. That is an amazing conference where we bring ag technology and regenerative farming together. That's something everybody can participate in. It's held in Monterey in January. It's a great place to get away from the Midwest too. And, we have a team that helps us with that. And the angel thing's pretty simple, and Tom is in charge of that. So just great people, and then they communicate within themselves, meetings and responsibilities, and people are empowered to make decisions. So that's how we're able to make things happen. I don't know if I did a good job answering that, but there you go. Any thoughts about good farm planning deal with climate change? So I think the more that you can improve soil, bottom line, healthier your soil, the more resilient you are to changing climate, period. So if that's the case, what can you do to dramatically improve your soil health as fast as possible? Integrate ruminants. So no-till corn, no-till grass crops, grow high biomass cover crops, integrate livestock. Do those things, do them, and your soil will change dramatically. Putting cattle in there, you can see a 1% and 3-year gain doing it right. And when you move from 3 to 4% organic matter, it's night and day. It's like that video I showed across the road. So just focus on soil health. Everything else falls into place. Skip strip cover crop planter works. Here's how the skip strip cover crop planter works. It's a John Deere 1990. We replumbed it so we could shut off every 4th row. So we just don't plant that row. And we plant it with GPS and a steerable hitch. And then we come back with the 30-inch corn and bean planter with the steerable hitch, and we just plant into where we had plugged off the previous rows. So it's simple in concept. Drives Ryan nuts on how to drive it and set up the GPS line and replumb it and everything. It's a real head scratcher to get it to work, but when it does work, and when you do get it working, it's fantastic. So my wife laughed at something. I don't know. I'll find out about it tonight. Do you rotate stock between paddocks daily? Yes, and that is one of our guarantees to our customers. They're moved every day. How long until they're back in the same paddock? Great question, and that depends on your local context. So within my local context, about 30 inches of rainfall, and great soils, we still want to give a minimum of about 30 days before we're back on the same acre again. Now, if we're in perennial grasses, I think that'll extend longer. I don't have a lot of experience with perennial grasses. This will be the first year. Up to this time, I've grown everything on cover crops. But we've done other techniques too, where we'll graze it lightly just to kind of, get across it and stimulate a little more growth, and then come back and graze it heavy. So it just depends on what you want to do. If you want a crop to be there when you're done, you graze it different than if you want to graze it all off, or if you want to stimulate it and then come back and stockpile graze after frost. Stockpile is just a fancy way of saying standing hay, and graze it. You can do it that way. So very good. But I mean, we rotate it also for soil, so we don't get trailing, we don't get water tank impact, and all those kind of things. How do you feel about selling carbon credits? I feel great about it. I just wish I could figure out, who to work with and stuff like that. Indigo Ag is there, $20 to $30 a ton, and they will go back in time for you, which was interesting. But I still think it's a very early market. Do you feel this will be here to stay? Yes, I do believe it will be. The reality is we should be carbon farming to do everything possible to get that carbon into the soil. It is worth far more in your soil, growing crops and saving your soil, than it ever will be for a check from Indigo Ag or from a government mandated cap and trade type of thing. The value for carbon is in growing the crop and growing a healthy crop. And if we can stack that enterprise then and get carbon credits as additional revenue source, then great. That's what we want to do. How do you feel about, that was on there, sorry. Any other questions that I've missed here? Totally agree. All right, that's good. I just make this stuff up, Jared. I don't know. Go ahead, Maggie.
We have a couple more minutes, so if anybody has any more questions, please jump at the opportunity.
The other thing that I'm looking at that's totally nuts, I'll fill in here, is permanent crops and grazing. Permaculture, realize it comes from a row crop farmer here. Permaculture is the last thing in the world you'd think about. I'm exploring that now. I'm interested to see about growing nut crops as protein sources and starch sources, along with grazing the floor and possibly produce, chicken tractors and those kind of things. We're working with our team in California on how to develop sheep or poultry that can go on the floor of an orchard to increase biodiversity there. We've developed specific machinery to be able to plant cover crops and orchards there. That's just amazing that we can make that happen, and it's beautiful. Just, you cannot believe the difference in the water cycle, water infiltration. I love what we're doing there on that. It's pretty fascinating. And then the next step is I keep giving the guys a hard time all the time. I keep saying principle five, and that's what we're going to do. Is we're going to bring livestock into almond and pistachio orchards. So stay tuned. Did you use a consultant to lay out your paddocks? No. I had talked to Jim Garish, he's very, very busy, and I talked to Alan Williams, and he's even busier, about coming and coaching us on this stuff. But I did a lot of just watching and doing, and when you watch and do, I think you get an idea of what is going on out there. And so I do think Joel Salatin has some good advice on some things, and one of those is, when you put up a fence system, put it up as temporary fence. And if you haven't moved the temporary fence for 3 years, make it a permanent fence. I think that's just a brilliant piece of wisdom there. So up to this point, almost all, well, it still is, all of our fencing except for the bull pasture is temporary. So we were temporary poly on everything until this year. And then this year we went to temporary high tensile on the perimeter and temporary polywire on the interiors, just because it helps with speed and longevity, ice, snow, deer, all those kind of things that can hurt a fence. And by the way, other than the one time that we had a load of cattle, I brought in finishers from Oklahoma that decided to head back to Oklahoma when they arrived. We have not had any issues with animals getting out. And other than calves that go below below the wire because they don't know any better, we just have learned that we can mow down the crops right next to the wire, and the calves will stay in the tall crop and not want to venture into the short crop because that's their herd instinct. So we work with that herd instinct once again just by observation, and we run a batwing mower on the cover crops adjacent to the perimeter fence, and that naturally keeps that calf off of the road. So there you go. Any other things, Maggie? I'm very disappointed Robin or JR didn't ask a question on here. So
I am curious, how much fun do you have doing all this?
oh my, I have a lot of fun doing it. And I think our team has a lot. It's weird. We all have a lot of fun doing it, but it's also a lot of work. So it's a weird fun. It's fun. We love what we do, and everybody really enjoys it, and you can see it. But it's not easy at any means. It's high risk. We've had to learn a lot. We've had to do a lot. I mean, we move every day. When it's minus 25, we move. When it's 103, we move. When it's pouring rain, we move. You know, we move every day. And I don't, people who aren't on the farm don't appreciate that as much as somebody who is, I think. But we do that, and we just do it because we know we're doing the right thing, and that's what makes it all successful.